Mark, I've known you for,
15.
I tried doing the math, over 15 years now. I'm 36. I started at the third floor before I was 21. I was 20. There's a lot of things that I think about when I think about Previs. First of all, I see you guys as directors, right? Like, I think it's a lot of people out there don't quite understand how close Previs artists work to the director and
Yeah,
how essential they've been to so many movies in history at this point in the past 10 years.
yeah,
Predominantly because, let's be honest, directors are a little embarrassed sometimes and don't, and or people don't want to show the early work, the early story work, right?
yeah,
So there's a misconception that like we go from a concept art to the movie.
yeah,
And there hasn't been enough exposure of not just the animation, but the brains of like the individuals that are working with this process, the brains of people like yourself. So
yeah.
I wanted to dig into some of this with through that lens, and I wanted to ask you, like, when did you know that animation was your calling, and how did you go about it?
I really didn't know that animation was my calling. It wasn't until I finished my diploma in general art when the teacher said to me, "So, of all these disciplines, which one is your career?" And I said, "Man, I've always had this desire to do some animation." She's like, "We don't offer animation. We did everything other than animation, filmmaking, photography, but." She kind of rolled her eyes and said, "I don't know what to tell you. We don't offer animation at all. But if you really want to do it and you want to do a degree in it, there's only one college that you can apply it to. And I would suggest you just come up with some storyboards and apply." So I really didn't know I was going to have this as my career until I got accepted into college. And even then, I hadn't done any animation to that point. None. So I didn't do any of my first animation until I got to college. And then I found that I loved it. But that leap from animation to previs was a significant one. It was something I just tried out, and I fell in love with working with the forest instead of the trees. You work on shots, and it's this shot, oh, and this shot, and this shot, and I get to be in the theatre with my mother at like dinosaur premiere, and she'd say, "Nudge me every time it's your shot." I'd nudge her when that 3 second shot would come up. But now I work on forests. I work on the whole forest. I work on the sequence. I find so much more reward in that, in kind of crafting that and designing that, than the individual shot. Even though I did love character animation, don't get me wrong, I just find more reward in previs.
So, how were you animating back then? When you first started going to college for animation, what were you using? What were your tools?
A pencil and paper.
Yeah.
There wasn't such a thing as, and I wish we had like a Gnomon college back then, but there wasn't such a thing. As I said, there was just one college I could apply to for animation as a degree. Everywhere else offered graphic design as your Bachelor of Arts, and you could specialize in animation. But one college offered animation as a degree, and so I went there. But I didn't even foresee that there was going to be computers doing animation at that point. You know,
What year approximately was this? How long ago?
I went to college 1984 to 1988,
Awesome.
and I was working 5 years in the industry before I bumped into the guys at ILM. And they were the ones that were saying, there's going to be a need for computer animators very soon. We'd like to take animators that know the craft and teach them the technology, which takes like 3 weeks, instead of taking somebody that has a technical background and trying to teach them animation, which takes like 3 years. So they were picking people at random to be guinea pigs, basically. So I was one of the guinea pigs picked to do some computer character animation, which had never been done before. They'd done creature effects with Jurassic Park. They were just about to win the Oscar when I joined. They were just about to have the Oscars. But they wanted to venture into character CG animation. And one of the biggest obstacles was, how are we going to make Casper speak? And nobody had done anything like this before. So we had to basically come up with the blend shapes technique. And I think we were the pioneers in using that. We would try and blend shapes at the same time as they were trying motion capture with someone with sensors around their lips, which looks super creepy. I mean, I can't imagine. That's a completely different Casper movie. That's a scary Casper movie. If they'd gone that route, but our blend shapes, it worked. The test worked with the computers interpolating between a closed mouth, open mouth. It looked like Casper's open and closing his mouth. So I didn't realize how on the spear tip of technology I was. I expected I was going to come in and just be taught all this stuff, not how, given the task of, okay, now make him talk. How are you going to do that? Think of some ways. Go.
Back then, one of the things that I always think about is how easy things are now, and why, when we're not only accelerating. I think most people think about tech and they go,
Yeah.
oh, but Unreal Engine is becoming faster, it's becoming better. The process is becoming faster,
and more accessible.
And more accessible. And I think, you going to the blend shapes, that's now common knowledge and the norm for
standard.
Yeah, it's a new standard. So that's awesome. What is the difference? You kind of touched on this, but what is the difference again between character animation and previs?
Previs encompasses so much. This is how I like to describe previs. Previs, I consider, is showing the client what their project is going to look like ahead of production or construction start. Because it can apply to not just filmmaking sequences, it can apply to theme park layout, theme park attraction. Previs is just showing the client what their project's going to look like. And also, our goal is to deliver their vision in a format that they can then share that with others. That's basically the role of the previs artist, to give the client their vision in a format they can take to other people to get a green light or to show clearly what a blueprint of what the sequence is going to be. But I love that problem solving. Like that problem solving, you get some problem solving in character animation, but this is like, I don't know, it's like a story film Rubik's Cube that you have to kind of work out, okay, if I do this, you'll get, your product. And the more information you get given by the client, the more accurate your previs can be.
Previs can be, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny when you say the years that you worked as an animator, right? Like I was born in '87. So, and you were my supervisor.
Tell me that.
You were my supervisor when I started on at the third floor, right? On some of the jobs immediately. So I always looked up to you and a lot of the supervisors. And one of the things that was very different in what I was doing was there were only this is when I started, maybe a studio of 25 people, and I was the second environment artist, or maybe the third environment artist. Andrew Huang was the second, I believe. And so then we saw that grow to 150 people. And so while I was working there, I thought it was fascinating how you guys were driving the director and I was driving, in many ways, the environments. But most of the time, they weren't production designers, right? And so at Narwhal Studios, we built a whole company around doing previs, but to get more of the information that you're saying into the previs, right?
Yeah.
They called it the virtual art department, but it's really a previs process that we just made really pretty. And so it all is in the name of getting more information in pre-production. And so for a long time, we were working in such ugly environments, and such ugly because the software didn't support it getting prettier.
Yeah.
That the only reason why I went pretty was to engage the production designer and the DP, so that, because I worked on so many projects with you guys and you guys would do camera with the director, but then they would straight up tell us like, oh yeah, the DP is going to come over and change those cameras. Oh, what lens did you use? Oh yeah, the cinematographer. That's great previs, but unless the production designer is involved, the whole environment's going to change. But most of the career was really, most of the time it was like figuring out where the action's going to happen. How is it that the action is going to happen? How are they going to engage with the props? Where are those props going to be? Working with you and you telling me like, hey, this is what I want the sequence to do. Can the environment reflect that? And that's a craft that's hard to get in front of people and explain its worth, right?
Yeah. It is like that sketch before the oil painting. I mean, you do the sketch to plan the oil painting, but then the sketch doesn't ultimately end up being part of the finished artwork. It was a sketch. But I'm agreed with you. I am no lover of waste, and I'm sure the client is not a fan of waste, because waste is just has a dollar attachment to it. So the less waste we have, the more we're putting those dollars to good use. So anything that can be gleaned from the previs is a bonus, whether that be the animation on the animation rigs that get sent to ILM or whatever. Anything you can glean. It's a shame that all the assets that you built were just basically placeholders for previs, and ultimately,
Had
done.
to change. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But we had it, funny enough, the first movie that I worked at the third floor was Alice in Wonderland. And that was working directly with the production designer. And then it's like I would go to other projects where it wasn't with production designers. And those projects, like people would go, okay, these are really beautiful sets, but they're
Yeah,
going to change. Andrew Jones is also the person that got me Jungle Book, where I supervised the whole real time team.
yeah,
Andrew Jones is also the person that was my production designer in The Mandalorian season 1, who gave me the opportunity doing those photoreal sets, right? So it's all about the people, but also it's what you find those people that allow you to do like the process that is going to reduce the waste, and that's half the battle, right?
yeah.
Like if you don't have the people that are going to, it's hard to reduce waste without the team being
You
on
have to
board.
have collaboration to reduce waste. You
That's
have to have communication with the art department or with the DP. There can't be closed gates. Can't be, oh, well, I'm not interested in the previs. There has to be an investment and an interest in the previs, because the previs is going to be this, foundation upon which you build your film. This is going to be the blueprint. So the more people we can get involved earlier, the better, because then we're steering it the right direction and not the wrong.
so
But
going back to Casper really
yes,
quick, because I were you at ILM for that?
yes,
And who so that was a little bit of back, and you were at that point an a character animator.
yeah.
And so who were you working with as a character animator? Like who was your boss?
I'd work under the animation director there. So
Okay.
I'd have my team. I had, I think, 6 in Casper crew. We were super efficient. We were so efficient, we jammed through all our Casper shots and then helped out the Ghostly Trio team.
That's right, yeah.
But I would report directly to, at that time, it was Eric Armstrong. He was the animation director, and he would be my voice to Brad Silberlin, that was the director. If I was lucky, I could get the two of them together, and then
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to play that kind of telephone game. Again, better communication makes for less waste.
And
But
then
that's who I reported to.
fast forward to, let's say, now, who do you work with, and how is it different?
Well, the last project I worked on was Ultraman Rising, which comes out in summer, and there I would be basically talking to the directors. There were 2 directors, Shannon Tyndall and John Ashima. I would talk to them. They'd pitch me the sequence. I'd take it away. I'd come back with my version of the previs for that sequence. I like to follow the boards on the first pass as accurately as I can.
Nice.
And then after that, then we make a departure. But I'd show them the boarded version. I'd get notes on where we could try different things. Previs is the ideal playground to experiment. You don't want to do that on the set with an army of people there on the live action set. You don't want to start experimenting. It's going to cost money. But previs is where you want to experiment. So after that first round, the directors would, hey, what if we tried this, or tried it from this perspective, or tried it with this emotion? Because a sequence has to have an emotion and a perspective. It can be, there's 2 sides to every story. So which side do you choose? You look at it from the hero side, the villain side, from observer side, neutral. So I would work directly with the head of previs, the head of story would be there. At Netflix, this is when all the heads came together, which is very unusual for previs, like we just were talking about. But the art director would be there. Everyone would be there to see the previs. So anyone could at one point say, excuse me, but I have a much more up-to-date version of that prop or that environment than you have. Or this should be over here. They can flag it nice and early in the previs. So I found that on the last show I worked for, that waste factor was tiny. We were progressively taking 2 steps forward, and not this 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. But I would work with them on 3 rounds of notes, and then hopefully get the approval on that last iteration of the sequence.
Nice. Yeah, it's a lot of the process. I love hearing it from you because I haven't spoken to a Previs supervisor at this capacity in a minute, but the process that is in the virtual art departments, the timelines, everything's identical to what we're used to.
Yeah.
And that's the funny part of this process. It is that I face a lot of animation supervisors and directors that might not quite understand how fast Previs moves and how 3 reviews, you're trying to get it out, you move it to next stage, you budget it out, quantify, and it gives you that starting point. So like when you're working with directors and with people that are wanting to engage with you in this process, like what's your approach? How do you align the team to work with you? Because a lot of times you're the new guy in the you're the digital coming to analog in many ways. Like you're the guy that's working as a storyboard artist pretty much many ways, but digitally. Do you face having to explain your role to those directors and or your approach?
I find less so now than 15 years ago when I met you and we first started doing Previs. There would seem to be this kind of mystery that surrounded Previs. I think a lot of that mystery is gone now for a lot of directors, and so nobody seems to be intimidated like they used to be by it. I remember directors used to be intimidated thinking that they couldn't speak the jargon, or they didn't know the technical jargon, and they felt like intimidated in directing. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember talking to them and saying, you just do what you normally do. Don't worry about the wordage. Don't worry about trying to have it translated into Previs speak, or just direct as you would. There's a shot or a sequence, and there's something that's demanded of that shot, of that sequence. Just tell me what that is. I always found my job was to try and jump inside the head of the director. If I can get inside the head of the director and understand where he's coming from, and some directors are better than that than others, then that would go a long way towards getting that approval. But someone like Spielberg is so great. He won't tell you how to do your job. He'll tell you what he wants the audience to take from that shot, and then you understand what is demanded of you.
When did you work with Spielberg?
When?
Yeah.
3 times. The Warhorse, Casper, he was a producer as well, and Ready Player One was the last time.
That's right.
But mainly on Warhorse is where we worked directly with him, and he'd come in. And
I remember when you guys were working on Warhorse, and I wanted to work on it. I didn't get to, but I liked that one. I wasn't needed. The environments where we reused all the environments. It was mostly forests and stuff like that. But
that was a great show because we had the storyboard artist Josh Shepard in the room with us. So we were helping him, and he was helping us. He would say, "Oh, can you give me an up angle of this mansion? Perspective shot." So we'd kick out a render for him so he could do his storyboards much more accurately and fast, and vice versa. He would help us with kind of describing what he was imagining for this shot. So
you see what you're saying right now?
What
you're saying? What you just mentioned?
Yeah.
So the virtual location scout process, like I would see you guys doing that. I would see you guys doing that process. Sometimes they would come to me because they wanted to know the environment. So like I worked with a lot of storyboards through my history. I mean, probably more than production designers. Like I worked with, and even you guys, like to make your environments, I'd work with the storyboard artist and then get you the environment, and then we would modify it, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward to now, and the process with Jon Favreau and the team, and what we really now lean onto is this concept of virtual location scouting, where we block out the environment, and in one session, 2-hour session, where people are dropping cameras, they could do it themselves in VR, or literally, the good part of them doing it themselves is that you could have 7 people with their own views doing their own thing, versus like up until The Mandalorian, I was in the hot seat and everyone was looking over my shoulders, and it's like I'm placing cameras, and so that's really where things accelerated on the Mandalorian because now you can have 7 people place those cameras,
Hmm.
and then we have a button, you click it, and it kicks out all those frames, and then the storyboard artist has all the frames the director was thinking, all the frames
Yeah.
the DP was thinking, all
Yeah.
the frames, and they placed those themselves, right? And so it in one session we're kicking out like literally sometimes 300 frames. Right? It's just like insane. And then you wean through which ones are the ones that the director goes and selects his favorites, and like you kind of like do this process of selection, and then a lot of that turns into the storyboards. But it's hard for me to explain how different it was when I was in the hot seat and there were 8 people behind me versus now all those 8 people have 8 times the amount of information basically now. Each
Yeah.
one of them has a computer at their house. Each one of them gets to place their cameras and talk to each other. And it's really to, I think there's a lot of distractions around people where they're like, but what's the value? And you actually hit the nail on the head. That is the value. It's to help refine the story,
Hmm.
to help. It's at that Previs stage where, and I think what's distracting is that at the Previs stage, you can have a photorealistic set now, right? So that's actually pretty distracting and misleading to people around what the value is. The value is purely to like, hey, everything could be photoreal now. You could click a button and AI is going to do it. And in a year, literally, even the Unreal Engine environments are going to get there. So what's the only thing that matters is the story. And so that's the biggest reason why we got into that. Now, John Favreau gets that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have every fucking filmmaker on multiple seasons have to do that. So it makes me happy hearing that because it is the same process. Like that whole collaboration between you and the storyboard artist is a lot of what inspired me, right? And
Yeah.
and in many ways, the animation team was really big at the third floor. I was like the environment team was really small, so a lot of it I was looking from the outside and going, man, how do I? So I like that one a lot. Now, do you consider yourself a storyteller?
Yes.
And
First and foremost. Yeah.
could you provide some examples of how you contribute to story?
Well, I mentioned a couple already.
Yes,
It's,
you did.
like I said, you can take a storyboard, and a storyboard's main purpose is to accurately or simplistically show what the story is. It doesn't really explore cinematography. And so I like to take a storyboard, and like I said, my first pass will be the storyboard pass, my storyboard version. But then you're really going to like dig into whose story are we telling, from which perspective are we telling it? Well, what's the emotion that we want to convey? Because the camera, in its subtle movement, can convey sadness. It can convey belittlement. It can convey power. As simple as an up angle on somebody makes them feel bigger than life, have a much bigger presence. So the camera can really bolster what the storyboards have laid out. They lay out the story in its simplest form, and we kind of I try to layer on the emotion and the perspective, and also try and get I'd like to involve the viewer. I really don't like being a bystander watching something from afar. I like the movies where you're in the action with the characters. If I can bring the audience into the action, ideally, I always say, if I want to place a camera, where's the worst possible place you'd want to be standing in a dangerous, situation? That's where the camera should be. You want to be in there. You want to feel that fear that the characters are feeling. I
Yeah.
feel like the camera is as much a character as anything in front of it. Always has been. And so I'm kind of an advocate for kind of pushing that. And we were talking about how some filmmakers, producers, directors feel intimidated or don't really see the value in Previs. I found that after they've worked with Previs, then they suddenly get it, and then they'll be back, and
Yep.
they'll build on top of what you did the first time because
Yep.
they understand what it can give them. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always, if it doesn't have an underlying story, I'm sure that I could name some films that have looked great, but the story is really lacking.
Hmm.
Where
I mean,
it's great eye candy, but you have an hour and a half or 2 hours just looking at that with nothing to enforce it. So you come out of the movie with images, but that's about it. You got
look, some
nothing.
of my best friend, my favorite characters, my favorite stories have been ruined by both poor story and poor visuals. Green Lantern, it's just like, and I look at these things and I go, 300 million, man.
Yeah.
How did we get here, right?
Where
And
did that money go?
where did that money go? And it really is hard for people that have the money to understand why do you invest at the beginning and just bring in a Previs supervisor or an art director that knows how to use work in digital in real time, the way that we're saying, and really just create Previs, right, and involve more people. But I think it's going to be the norm, right? It's just a no brainer. I think right now it feels unattainable, but the more we talk about it, like it's really a very small footprint. It really is a matter of the problem is that there aren't a lot of people like you and like me, right? There really aren't, like people that have been in pre-production and understand filmmaking and that have worked directly with those directors and DPs and production designers, even more rare. And so we're going to see more of them. Netflix is hiring directly into like these artists directly to work with these directors. So is Disney. So is Lucasfilm. And I think that's the beginning of that, of us roles like ours becoming production artists, not VFX or etc. So
Yeah, I found that on the last shows I worked with, Previs became like a hub that all the other departments would feed into. We'd be the kind of the focal point of that, so like a magnifying lens, magnifying glass, making a lens. We'd be where it was making bringing all of those things together and showing the combination of them. And I found that also being the hub, we'd be very close to editorial, especially in animated features. There'll be Previs and editorial, and we'd be kind of best buddies, sleeping partners.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's how it worked. It worked in such a way that there was no waste. Everybody was informed. Everyone had a voice. Everyone, like I said, was in that meeting when I pitched that Previs, so anyone could point out, wait, you're forgetting blah blah blah. Oh yes, of course, write it down. My next version will have that, incorporated. But it's all about communication, and if we can kind of bring people together as a hub in Previs, and bring all these filmmakers' minds together, then we're gonna pick the fruit of all of them
Mm-hmm.
and make this great fruit salad.
I like Todd Chanowski. He says like, "Let's throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks." you know, he's just like throw ideas and like, and
Yeah.
then what sticks is what goes. And I really like that analogy as well.
But that's what Previs is great for. That kind of experimentation, that kind of blue sky thinking. That's where you want to do it. That's where you've got the budget and the freedom to do it before suddenly involving all these hundreds of people and the live action set and all the practical and everything. Before you get to that stage, try things out in Previs.
So in this process of previs, when does the environment come in? Like, how do you like to work? So you work with the director, and then sometimes you have editorial storyboards, and then you're also working with potentially an asset artist that's giving you characters, rigs, a setting. How is that relationship between you and let's say the environment artist or like the asset artist,
It
and how do you change their work?
it really depends on the project, because sometimes the environment isn't as important as other times. Sometimes the environment
Mm-hmm.
dictates the action
Mm-hmm.
because it has to be designed for the action to know what can we do within it. We need a workplace to a jungle gym before we can play. At other times when it's just kind of like, I don't know, just like, oh, it's just a conversation on a desert road. That's as big a role as the environment brings. It's mainly about the conversation. And so that it happens on a desert road in the middle of nowhere, just happens to be the location. And it's not as important as in some other shows where the environment is everything. If you imagine Squid Games, how could you previs Squid Games without the environment?
Mm-hmm.
You need that playground before you know
Mm-hmm.
what you can do. And the reason that we animate to the degree we do in animation is because we have to inform the camera. But I can't start my studio set without that environment, because the environment is the set. And once I have the set, then I can place the characters in that set. I can set my cameras, and then I can get to work. But I mean, the environment. I have to have a world to shoot in, so the environment is everything, really.
Yeah.
You can't start without it.
No, and it's like
Sometimes it's more important than other shows.
yeah. No, and I think that's great because yeah, to speak to that as well as an environment artist, right? Like you're completely right. There are times where it's a forest. You could just go online, you find the forest. Hey, here you go, and
Yeah,
you can block it out. We delete some trees, and then there's other times where it's an alien junkyard with like recognizable
yeah,
pieces from Thor, and you gotta freaking design the hell out of every ship and every piece and then even if it's a block out, right? It takes time. Actually, a good one we worked on was the one with Peter Berg. What was that? Battleship.
battleship.
Battleship. And I remember we there's a sequence at the beginning where they're inside of the ship, and that one had a lot to figure out because it's like it was a closed environment, like it's a ship, so you guys didn't have a lot of space, so you guys needed me to like make the set, and we had a lot of back and forth where it's like, hey, this is in the way. It's like, well, that's actually where it's at.
Yeah,
Remove it. That's fine. We're getting rid of it.
yeah.
So, and there was a lot of back and forth on that one. So
Yeah,
that's incredible.
sometimes they choose the actual real life location. I remember on Oblivion, they'd already chosen an old a kind of dilapidated powerhouse to shoot in.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have an actual location they're planning to shoot in, then you have to reproduce that in 3D so that
Mm-hmm.
we can then set up some setups for cameras and see what we can shoot, within those confines.
That's a great
So
point. A
yeah,
lot of production designers too. They have different backgrounds, right? Like when we work with production designers that have concept art backgrounds, we tend to have to create environments from concept art, and they don't reference is very limited typically in that sense. They have stuff online versus, and a good example for that would be Tom we worked with, or Will Hatay from Ant-Man, for example. Like they
okay,
were all really weird locations, but also his roots came from concept art, and so he liked working through concept art versus Andrew Jones from The Mandalorian, who his roots are in location scouting, and he also knew how to do concept art and stuff, but he really was really into location scouting. So even if it was an alien world, he always had a real life location that he was referencing. Would always tell us, "No, look at this location. This is a real spot." And obviously, inside of volcanoes or like really weird locations that he would always help us ground ourselves on, and we would build often that location and then
yeah,
deviate from that location. So it's a lot of the all the brains are different. Even you could have a director that comes with the same background, different backgrounds as well. They could come from acting, they come from storyboarding, and I'm sure that it modifies your approach even slightly, if anything.
yeah.
Cool. So let's see here. So then, now that like we've had some evolution in the industry, right? I just learned that Previs came from a Coppola movie. Like he's the one that invented Previs. I
Oh, really?
actually need to educate myself better so I know exactly which movie it was
I
because
thought
I
it was
just
Escape
watched.
from New York.
What was that? Streets from New York? That's what you thought?
Escape from New York, I thought, was one of the first where they actually had really basic computer graphics to plan out some shots around the Statue of Liberty, I think it was, or
I don't even think he was using digital yet.
I'm
He
sure
was
that
big.
I'm
I
sure
think.
that digital, some really bad. I mean, it's really basic kind of wire vector kind of graphics, but I remember doing a presentation back in 2010 in Miami where I was doing the history of Previs, and I had some examples of, I think it was Escape from New York, and also
Who
George Lucas,
directed Escape from New York?
John Carpenter.
John Carpenter. Okay.
And George Lucas, when he used the 12-inch Star Wars figures on makeshift speeder bikes, and they literally kind of just flew them through the forest of Endor and got all their shots for the speeder bike chase for Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. I just watched this video where I guess he used Previs on Apocalypse Now, and I haven't shared anything on here, so I'll probably link that video here. But
Okay.
he used it on Apocalypse Now, and it was extremely primitive, but he was able to basically see every single shot. And it's this guy on TikTok that does a whole breakdown on it. Safari sent it to me, and I was fascinated because it's just a little bit of history, a little piece of history. But yeah, it's 5 minutes long. I'm not gonna be right now. The third house, if anyone's curious on TikTok, talks about it. But the whole idea of Previs is really has been around for a long time. It's just that I think it's been so focused around the mind of a director, and as times have gotten more complex, I have a theory
Right.
that things have gotten a lot harder to design for. So, like production designers, the directors needed Previs at first the most, but things have gotten more difficult to design. It's no longer just on location and backlot. Now you have in-camera VFX, you have VFX, you have all these different processes around the real-time process that's coming, and the art department has been analog, still is analog, with no way, like they don't really do Previs. Like Previs hasn't been a thing. They've been doing set design and Rhino and stuff, but it hasn't been collaborating with filmmakers on the set design, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of why I think Previs is needed for art departments. Like they call it the VAD, whatever they want to call it, but it is just Previs for more of the decision makers on the film. And obviously different decision makers have different priorities. So that's why they need their own team member. It's like your priorities, Mark, are different than Safari's or mine if we're working with a production designer. And that's explaining that value and people understanding it to what you said earlier. The only way for them to understand it seems to be if they do it with us or if they test it, right? If they test it, write it. We've had the people really are into it. Like they understand the value. So then how do you see with this, like, do you try to stay ahead of the curve of the tech curve or do you stay in the story?
I try and keep up with tech
Yeah.
because it just seems like my whole career since I moved into computers has been just trying to evolve what I do. Every year it changes. There's something new that you have to incorporate or use. There's always somebody reinventing the tech and making it more efficient or better or streamlined in some way. So I found it hard enough just keeping up with the tech. But then I come from a pencil and paper background. And when I was at Disney, I did try and keep hold of that ignorance of tech because I was working on Treasure Planet and the rigger was making this character. And I was asking him for things. He's like, no, we can't do that. You can't have both. You can't have it do this and this. And then I'd be like, oh, damn, And then the next day he'd come back, oh, I've done it. Like,
Yeah.
my ignorance would actually push him to make advances.
That is.
It's true. It's true. And so I felt, oh, there's a value to being ignorant because I'm asking for things that don't exist yet, but planting that seed. And then the next day I come back and I found, oh, it's taken. I've got some shoots sticking up, So I've always, I don't like to get too involved in the tech because I think my value is in, like I said, in story and storytelling and the visuals. And as long as I have a knowledge enough to use the tools and get that out, then I'm good. But I don't know. I do find that, tech is amazing. And some of the stuff I look back on my early work and I wish I had dynamics back then, or I wish I had constraints back then.
Or FK animation.
FK
You remember when
or oh my God. Choice.
Yeah, when I started at the third floor, we didn't have FK yet. It was you guys were doing.
Yeah.
For those of you that know what I'm doing here, everything was like, first I got to do this, and then the neck, and then the face. Now you just grab here, and the whole thing moves, right? And
that's IK.
What is it?
IK.
IK. So yeah, IK is what we.
Cinematics.
I remember that being like such a difficult thing to do at the time, and we were trying to figure it out. And so like, you there's something that I often mention to my artists, the people I hire. I go, what came first, the artist or the tech? And I remind them of that, right? Because people are very aware of the tech, but a little less aware of the artist. And so The artist meaning, why is it that the tech was born? Because an artist asked for it. So
Yeah,
like understanding what is it that they asked for. They didn't ask for an LED screen staged where you can shoot. They asked to find efficiencies on using virtual backgrounds, right? And it's like through those efficiencies, you start troubleshooting what's going to get those efficiencies. How are we going to, how do we immerse the actors more? How do we get all these digital work to actually be cheaper instead of having to budget it out per frame? Like it's not every green screen now. It's build the world, get as much as you want in there. And
yeah,
so those the artist came first. All of those requests came from an artist. All of the successes came from the artist. And
yeah,
so the more we get away from the artist, the poor quality we see, right? The more mesmerized we've gotten with pretty pictures, the poor, that's what we're getting, poor, these movies sometimes that are just like, man, like,
yeah.
what happened?
Yeah, you can tell the movies that have been made through committee, other than a vision.
Yeah.
When it's the director's vision, mainly in the 70s and before, there was a lot more trust on the part of the director by studios, and kind of 80s, 90s when digital came along, it was more kind of studios trying to steer movies a bit more. Like thinking, oh, if we make a movie with these things in it, we're going to make dollars, and then they'll be watching along the way and putting their 2 cents in, but diluting the vision in some ways. It's much better if you give the keys to the director, say, okay, you drive.
Yeah.
You take me on this road journey. And that's why I like to try and get into the head of the director. And all those projects that I've been involved in where there is a vision, once you get the vision, you're hooked. Like, I can't, when it comes to like the end of the day,
Yeah.
do I have to stop working like that? You're
It
into it.
is, it feels really good. It is, I mean, we're in a creative realm and an industry, right? And it
Yeah,
is,
we feed off of it.
yeah, and you feed off. It's so fun when you have a vision and you can facilitate someone achieving that vision. Oh,
Yeah,
it's like the best feeling.
yeah.
It feels so good.
Yeah, and I love throwing it out there and saying, is this what you envisioned? And either it does, and that's a great, or they'll say, oh no, you've got, and you tweak it and you make it the
Hmm.
vision. But
It's
just
just
that,
as it's just as gratifying when they say, when you have a good relationship with like I worked with Angels for 10, 15 years at this point, right? Like
yeah,
it feels just as good when he pushes back because first of all, we have trust. So I know that we know that there's a reason why he's pushing back, but we may not understand why, but we know that there's a reason. So we trust him and he trusts us.
yeah,
Now we're gonna come back with the solution that he's looking for, right? And
yeah,
I think that that's the vulnerability that every artist has, but that's also the reward. It's like
yeah,
that's also what feels like feeds me continuing to do this.
yeah. And sometimes you question. I'll get something pushed back, and I wanted more like this, and I'm thinking, really? But then I do it, and think, oh yeah, you're right. Yep, yep, you're right. This is much better. So there has to be that trust on both sides.
Well, buddy, I appreciate you. We're gonna have many more of these, but I want to ask you: is there anything you would like to close this out with, or anything you want to tell the audience that might listen to this?
Tell the audience. Oh, you put me on the spot here, Felix. What would I like to tell the audience? I would tell the audience to look into what we are doing, because we are going to have the focus on us very soon. I'm sure we're going to be making some great concept pieces together, and final production work. So keep an eye on Narwhal Studios. That's what I would say.
Oh, buddy, I appreciate you. And we'll close it with that. Have a good day today, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
See you.
Thank you.